Satan, Lucifer, Belial, Leviathan, Samael.
Welcome. This is Aleister Nacht. I'm glad you're with me tonight. I've got a very special guest tonight, Jeremy Crow. Jeremy, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Alistair.
I've looked forward to having you on the program for some time, so I'm very happy that this worked out like this. How long have you been on the left-hand path?
Well, you know how they say when you realize that your left-hand path, then you understand that you've probably pretty much always been on it, like a coming home sort of thing. But I became aware of my connection to the left-hand path about 26 years ago. I had already previously been an occultist and practiced ritual magic and tarot and things like that, but I had considered myself right-hand path at the time. And then at one point, there was just this moment where I realized that I was a Luciferian in particular. And from that point, that was about 25 or 26 years ago.
So you've been on the path for a long time then.
Yeah, you know, it feels like I've been on for my whole life, Brett, basically, at this point.
So I noticed you were initiated into several esoteric orders. One of them is the Golden Dawn.
First, I actually was a member of an esoteric Masonic order, which was what some people would refer to as fringe masonry or clandestine. Because it was co-Masonic, it had men and women equally. And I was a member of that at first, even though I had been practicing Golden Dawn. But something about it just kind of drew me. And I wanted to explore the mysteries and symbols of the Masonic order. And so when I got involved in that, and I thought that it was really well done, a really professional system and that sort of thing. But ultimately I ended up feeling that I couldn't be myself because during that time I realized I was a Luciferian. And while there were other Luciferians in the order, even at the very top, they didn't want anybody talking about that because they wanted people to have their own interpretations, I guess. And so I felt like to some extent I was being untrue to myself to hide that part of myself, which I felt was the core around which everything else orbited. And so I left that and I ended up joining an actual Golden Dawn temple, as you had mentioned. And it was pretty good, but as I was getting further and more experience in it, I realized that it was they were acting in a very cultish manner, I would say. So it was like manipulative, and they were getting you to do so much, like it, not just your own personal work, but coming in and donating your time and effort to building the temple, like painting or whatever, right? And it was just like so much. And I'm like, this is too much, you know? And they're like, oh, well, some people have different priorities than others, and trying to make me feel ashamed, for having a life outside of the temple. And I was like, what? That's wild that you would, try and say like some people have, I think he said carnal, desires is more priority than their spiritual desires or something like that. And I said, you know what? F you, I'm out of here. And I ended up joining the OTO after that. First, I just kind of hung around with a lot of members of the OTO in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And I would attend public events hosted by the OTO. And my immediate circle of my closest friends were all in the OTO. And so at some point I decided, you know what? I'm going to join as well and see what this is all about. And, part of it was because I wanted to share that bond with my closest friends. But also I was exploring different types of ritual magic and occult, and I had been, hanging around it for a while, and so I joined that. And I was only officially a member of it for about a year when a decision by international headquarters ended up shutting down our local body, and in favor of another pre-existing local body in the area that had been inactive for over like 2 years or something. They hadn't done literally a single meeting, but we had been doing like at least 2 to 4 meetings a month. A lot of them were public and open to the greater occult community. And they ended up shutting ours down, revoking our charter.
Wow.
Over some technicality. Even in like they had to pick, basically they ended up deciding they had to pick one. The vibrant, active group or this other one that had been basically dead for 2 years. And they picked the dead one. And so I was like, God, that's like left a really bad taste in my mouth. So I got out of there. And I was like, they said, oh, you can go to the next nearby, you can travel to the next nearby temple if you want. Like, because I was like, well, there's no meetings here now, And they're like, well, you can travel to like Buffalo, I think it was, from Toronto, and you can go to their meetings. And I was like, it was just that bad that I was like, okay, I'm not going to be in an organization that the international headquarters would make such a decision as that,
Do you feel like that organization is just political based? Do you think it just kind of boils down to a clique? I mean, I don't know. I'm just kind of asking.
At the higher levels, yeah. I think at the individual local branch, people can have a lot of fun, and it's often really good. I've heard some problematic groups, local bodies in the OTO. Some of them, aren't that great, but you can find good ones out there and have a good local experience. But it's when the international headquarters starts interfering with what you're doing, then it can be very disappointing.
You were also ordained in the Gnostic Church of Canada. Tell us a little bit about how that came to be.
So when I was a kid, and the very first time that I went to a Catholic mass, was because my parents wanted to put me into Catholic school, but I hadn't been baptized, and I was like 4 or 5 or something like that. And my birthday is in January, so I was a little older when they registered me because of the way that the year worked. But I remember them taking me to the priest was like, well, he has to be baptized if he's going to get registered at the school, the Catholic school. And so they said, okay, well, let's get him baptized. And they said, well, before I baptize him, you got to come to a couple of masses first. So then you're like part of the congregation, basically. And so they were like, okay. And I don't remember if my dad was there or not, but I remember sitting beside my mom when we were in mass. And I kept, oh, what's that? What is that? What are they burning over there? And stuff like that. Why is he wearing those robes? And what is he doing why is everybody walking up there? And she said, you remember when he said those words about the body and the blood? Well, they turned the bread into the body of Jesus and the wine into the blood of Jesus. And then everybody goes up and eats and drinks it. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
This is like the
Wow.
first time I was exposed to any of this type of thing. And they've got like incense censers going around and candles and hymns and I was like, I remember thinking though, I was like, well, that sounds insane, right? Like, but he must be doing some kind of crazy magic if he's doing that. But if he's doing that, like an incredible feat of magic, like that, why is he doing it in such a monotone, like he's bored out of his mind? Here he is doing this insane, like crazy magic thing, and he's delivering the lines like he's bored. I was like, and I knew in my mind that it was fake. But I thought to myself, if this is real, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to do it so effing good. I mean, whatever the equivalent of that as a 4 or 5-year-old, right? Wouldn't have, swore or whatever. But I'm going to do that so good that they're going to put it in their mouth. They're going to spit it on the floor because they're going to be like, what? This is real blood. That's how good I'm going to do it, and I got that in my head. And as I got older, I realized, that I didn't agree with a lot of the teachings of the Catholic Church. And eventually I decided, I'm not Catholic and I can't be a priest under this Roman Catholic Church system, right? For one thing, I always wanted to have a family at some point, and I didn't want to take that possibility away, but because you have to be celibate if you're a Roman Catholic priest. And I was like, well, that's already a no-go right there.
Yeah. Well, in theory.
In theory.
In
That's
theory.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I was with the Masonic group, it turned out that basically all of the top people were in the Theosophical Society. And most of them were in like the upper, I think it's called the Esoteric school, which is kind of like an elite, level of the Theosophical Society. And it turned out that about half, I found out later, that they were either Luciferians or they were members of the Liberal Catholic Church. And so I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. I was already by that point when I realized that there were other Luciferians in the Masonic group. I had already discovered that I was a Luciferian, and so I started looking to figure out if, prodding to see if I could find any more. And like I said, I found it all the way up to the very top. But the other thing was the Liberal Catholic Church, and I still had some of those, that imprinting from when I was young. And I explored that a bit, and I thought it was pretty cool, but it's still really churchy and Jesus-y, but I ended up finding somebody in my local area that was priest, and he was just an independent priest of the liberal Catholic Church, and he had to hustle to do it as a full-time thing. And he was a pretty cool guy, actually. And I would go to his liberal Catholic mass sometimes, and sometimes I would do some, help him out with it a bit. And then one day he just kind of disappeared off the face of the planet. I don't know exactly what happened to him. I just basically couldn't get a hold of him, and I don't know, didn't really have any other contacts locally in the congregation, because I just would talk to him sometimes and I would go to his things sometimes. But it got me looking around, and one of the other members told me about Gnosticism. And I was like, well, I had kind of looked into that before, but it seemed really dark at the time. But then by this point, I now had considered myself Luciferian for a little bit when he had brought it up. And I thought, well, let me take a look at it again, because maybe I have a different perspective now. And I started looking into it, and I was like, this really actually makes a lot of sense. And it helps me reframe those stories that I had grown up with, and it allowed me to do it in a way that I was able to not throw out the baby with the bathwater, in a sense. I was able to integrate a lot of the teachings of the Gnostic perspective into my wider worldview, you could say. And I met the Bishop of Canada for the Gnostic Church. And I'm not talking about like the Thelemic one that's associated with the OTO. I'm talking about like an apostolic Gnostic church, where they track the lineage of the ordinations and everything like that. And there's multiple lines that it's similar to how the Roman Catholic Church does it. And so they had a bunch of different groups that were all doing sort of their own variant, but it was all connected via this Gnostic communion, they kind of called it. And the group that I was a part of was what was here in Canada. And it was the only Gnostic church in Canada. Like, that was the only Gnostic organization in Canada. And it just so happened the bishop, or the Archbishop of Canada, was in the same city as me in Toronto. And so I called him up, and I wanted to ask him about Gnosticism, and he asked me some questions. I asked him some questions. I explained to him what my thoughts on Lucifer were. So I called him up. I just basically looked him up in the phone book and gave him a call, and just hoped that he would answer, I suppose. And I called him, and he was really nice. This is Carl Emmanuel, and he was from Grenada, but got consecrated as a bishop in Barbados. And so his lineage went back to the Barbados group, which then ended up, through him, they connected back to the Gnostic communion that was in North America and elsewhere. And they basically were able to recognize and connect with that group in Barbados, because Carl went there and connected with them, and he ended up getting consecrated as a bishop and came back and started a branch of it in Canada. So I explained to him my thoughts on Lucifer. He agreed, and then he said, okay, I'll take you on as a student. And I was like, oh, okay. I wasn't sure if that was what we were talking about, but Sounds good to me. And
Yeah.
so I ended up, he ended up becoming my mentor in Gnosticism and some other groups too, similar Martinism. I was part of Martinism under his, you know, leadership. And I, we would do either private ritual or we would do group ritual with a larger, with basically the local group of Gnostics, the local congregation. And we would do that at least twice, sometimes up to four times a month. And I was helping with the mass and that sort of thing, learned the different ways of doing all the different parts of it. We tried out a couple different variants, but there was one that we would do most of the time. And I got ordained up to all through the minor and major holy orders, up to and including priest. And then I served as the local congregation's priest in Toronto as the primary officiant for about a year or so after that. I ended up kind of running into a similar thing with finding out. I started posting stuff online anonymously about Luciferianism and Gnostic Luciferianism in particular. And I had a Yahoo email group for it where I would write these lessons and I would put them out in, these short things about it, and I would put it out to the group. And I kept noticing that members of the clergy of this Gnostic communion, bishops especially, were joining it. And then I'd be like, oh, hey, yeah, it's me. I'm the one, it's Jeremy. I'm the one running this group. That's cool that you're interested in this. And then they're like, oh, yeah. Yeah, well, I was just curious, and don't tell my congregation that I was in your group. And I was like, geez, it's the same kind of thing, right? Like for some reason there was that stigma there, and they didn't want to let people know that what they were interested in because they were afraid of that stigma. So I wanted to be able to be open about it. So again, there was a couple things that happened. One of them was in the Martinist order when I got my third degree. I was asked what my fraternal name would be, frater or whatever. And I said, Lucifer, frater Lucifer. And my bishop said, oh, I don't know. And I was like, why? What's the problem with frater Lucifer? No, did somebody else already take it? And he goes, no, I don't know if they're going to be able to accept what you mean by that. They're going to think all these crazy things about it. And I don't know if they're going to be able to understand. And he said, just use frater Lucian. And it basically means the same thing. And I said, all right, here I am in the middle of the thing, right? And he has taken me out to like the antechamber, the outside of the actual temple area. And that was part of the ritual where I go out. And then he gets the name, and he can bring me back in and announce that name or something like that. And so we were out of there. And then so I was like, I'm in the middle of this thing, and I'll just go with it, right? Because I don't know if he's gonna accept me taking, he's pretty firm about it. And I was like, I'll just do it. So I went in, and they called me frater Lucian. But it was supposed to be frater Lucifer. But that was part of it. I felt like I couldn't be open about who I was or about Luciferianism. And I was like, this stigma is never going to go away if people don't talk about it and people don't share what it actually means. And so ultimately I ended up having to leave. I wasn't kicked out or whatever, but I couldn't I couldn't do it anymore. You know? Uh I wanted to be able to be a light bringer and not hiding my light, you know? The knowledge. I wanted to share that knowledge openly, not under some pseudonym. I just wanted to be able to be Jeremy, you know, and share what I knew about Luciferianism, what I had been discovering about it, how it connected with Gnosticism and that sort of thing from my perspective.
Well, that brings us to the Assembly of Light Bearers. So, how did you come about being involved with them? And I believe Michael W. Ford is that's his organization or he's associated with it. But can you kind of explain that?
I was a part of another organization between that called the Ordo Luciferi. And I had decided I was going to do something explicitly Luciferian and I was going to start something, but then I realized, you know what, if there's something already out there that's really close to what I was going to do, I might as well join that. And it's already a community that exists, you know, and I can support that. And so I did find something that was pretty close to what I was interested in. I had the vision I had for it. And so I decided to join that. And over the time that I was active with that group, I ended up eventually becoming the head of that group. And then it kind of collapsed at one point because of reasons. I found that the entrenched community of leaders that were in there had gotten complacent about not advancing the order forward, and there was some bullying issues, and I just couldn't get it to move in the direction that I was hoping it would with actual practices, and because I had written an initiation ritual for it and a couple other rituals for it. I'd redesign or help rejigger the whole degree system for it and that sort of thing. But there was only so much that I could do, and it basically ended up crumbling. But it went open source. So the material still kind of was out there and people could still utilize it if they wanted to. And then I was continuing to do things like on YouTube and putting out articles online. And I was approached by somebody who had a group going in Texas that was based off of the material that I had put out there, as well as the material that Michael W. Ford had put out there. And it seemed like he had developed a pretty decent local community and was starting to attract some interest from outside of his local area, and he needed help with actually how to run a group. And I thought, well, this is kind of like what had been thinking that I'd wanted to build, something that could just be, well, I'd had ideas about that sort of thing, an explicitly Luciferian church type group. I wasn't too fancy on the name, the Greater Church of Lucifer. I never really liked that name that much, but that was what the name was. And I was invited to become a co-president with the existing person who was Jacob. He went by Jacob No. And it was starting to grow. We were getting all kinds of new members joining it. And we had decided that it was going to be, we ended up getting Michael W. Ford involved. I talked to him at a Flambeau Noir event that I'd produced. And he was there. He was one of the people that we had spoken with to do a talk there. And he gave a talk at that Flambeau Noir event, which is the International Left Hand Path Conference. So I talked to him about it, and I said, it seems like it's something that I had wanted to create already. And it's got a mix of teachings that I put out there and your teachings. And he thought that it was a good idea. He liked the idea of working with me and building something like that. And this Jacob guy had a lot of enthusiasm and drive. So we went for it, and it ended up becoming quite big. And we had branches all over North America. We had a bunch in South America, Europe, all kinds of different places. We had at least a dozen countries, I believe, we had members in. And we had decided that the GCOL, the Greater Church of Lucifer, would be focused on the philosophy and lifestyle of Luciferianism rather than the occult practices, because there's no standard, but it's easier to agree on a lot of the philosophy concepts. So nobody ever had to agree to all of the ideas, but we were giving kind of common generalized ideas about it. And then there would be individual lectures around on the different local branches that would get into different variants of different people's experiences, and they would share their knowledge on various different topics that they might be a subject matter expert in, or did research on, or had done their own extensive practice with, and that sort of thing. And people were sharing their knowledge with the groups. And basically it was like most of the time it was just prepared lectures by members of the community, and sometimes guest lecturers would come in as well to the various different local branch meetings. Occasionally there would be a group ritual or here and there, and we had some really simple ones that were not very elaborate, and we did that to make it more inclusive of people who may have different styles of working. And then, and it got quite big, and we ended up being able to support a local physical brick and mortars establishment, a temple that we opened up in Spring, Texas, where we had the highest concentration of members, and also where Michael Ford was located at the time. We signed a 1-year lease on that, and it ended up getting press in the local news in Texas. It was in the quaint old town of Spring in Texas with, a little, fancy cookie shop and a knitting yarn shop and that sort of thing.
And a Luciferian church.
And a Luciferian church. Yeah, exactly. So there was a little bit of backlash from the community, and there was some vandalism. Somebody had taken one of the neighbors' lawn ornaments from adjacent to our building, stole like one of the other businesses, like ours, obviously not a business, but it was amongst businesses like that, right? And so one of the neighboring businesses, they picked up, they got their lawn ornament stolen, and then somebody threw it through the window of our building, and then jumped in a car, and then whoever was driving it drove off. Oh, and there were frequent protests, people with signs picketing. And one of the most hilarious things was actually there was a Protestant group and an ultra Catholic group that were there, both protesting at the same time. And they ended up getting into a big argument with each other about branches of Christianity. They're like, oh, Protestants are wrong because blah blah. And they're like, what? You Catholics aren't even Christian, blah blah, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that was so hilarious that they were like out there just fighting. And another funny story was one time there were people out there protesting, and it started raining like crazy. And so Jacob ended up buying a box of those disposable plastic ponchos, and he brought them out to them and said, "Hey, I know you guys are, weren't prepared for this. Here, whoever wants one of these, go ahead and take it." Just to be nice, right? Like he's like, you guys can have your right to protest if you want on public property, right? Just don't come on our property. You're fine. And he was just trying to be friendly, right? And somebody in the back yelled out, "Don't take it, you'll die." And nobody took one. Not a single person took one of these plastic ponchos.
That's the herd mentality. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So it turned out that Jacob ended up being not so nice of a guy. Or maybe, the position got to him or something. I don't know. Because he was maybe not prepared for that kind of thing. But honestly, I think it was just he was not a good guy. When it turned out, he was good at putting on a good person persona. But underneath that, he was, very selfish and took advantage of his position by embezzling money and that sort of thing. So once we realized what was going on, we immediately took action and kicked him out. And we went through legal matters and managed to get him to agree to pay back all the money that he had taken. And so we got back the majority of the money, and we made sure that everybody who had made orders that didn't get fulfilled ended up getting made good for that and that sort of thing. But it did take a hit to the organization for something like that to happen. And we ended up deciding to change the name because, for one thing, I never really liked that name to begin with. And I had thought of a new name that I like better anyways. And so I pitched it, and it was Assembly of Light Bearers, with the idea that the members themselves are the light bearers. The other one implied, and we always had people talking about this, the other name, the Greater Church of Lucifer, it implied that there was a specific entity named Lucifer that we were probably worshiping. It wasn't explicitly theistic, but people made the assumption that it was, and we wanted to be open to all Luciferians. And to me, I don't think that whether you're theistic or not is a defining factor of whether you are Luciferian. At least I don't think that it's the most important factor, at least. I feel that the most important factor is seeking out knowledge and taking opportunities to share that knowledge with others who are looking for it. And especially in a case where that knowledge can emancipate somebody from a system of control that is exploiting ignorance or twisting knowledge, whether that be just an individual person who's manipulating somebody to help out. So if you find out, information, and you can help a person who's being manipulated to make informed decisions with their life, or it can be on a whole other scale, like when Galilei decided to announce that the earth rotated around the sun, in a time when the Roman Catholic Church had essentially ultimate power They were extremely powerful at the time. And that information undermined the established doctrine of the power structure of the Roman Catholic Church. If people were allowed to take that as a serious idea, it would throw into question certain aspects of the established doctrine, and people would start doubting other parts. But it was out there. The cat was out of the bag, but he was forced to recant it because otherwise they would have executed him. But the cat was already out of the bag. Like Pandora's box had already been opened,
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Right.
genie was out of the lamp already.
Right. You can't
And
put that back.
no. And so that idea got out there because he was willing to take on that level of personal risk and share that knowledge. And it probably freed a lot of minds. And that is the light bearer archetype. It's basically the story of Prometheus played out in various different ways, in different, depending on the situation, the context you find yourself in, the knowledge you find yourself in possession of, and that sort of thing. What your current situation, each person can become a light bearer or a Lucifer. That's what the word Lucifer means literally, as I'm sure you, sure you know. But for anybody who's watching this, the word Lucifer literally means bringer of light or light bearer in Latin. And so the assembly of light bearers, the members were the light bearers, each in their own unique way, and we were assembling together. We were coming together to collaborate on things that we could agree on. Right. And so I thought that was a really much better name. And Michael and Hope Marie Ford, his wife, was also a equal co-president with us. So once we kicked Jacob out, it was the three of us that were running it together, and we continued for a little while. But some other things happened with, one guy who was coming up, in a Canadian member actually, that I was sort of mentoring. He was coming up in leadership. He was making a name for himself and learning the skills of, giving a talk and things like that. And he was coming up, and he was very charismatic, and people were gathering around him essentially, and he was becoming a leader in the community, and he was going to step up to one of the top leadership positions. And Michael and Hope Marie Ford, they were going to take a step back from active leadership to focus on some of their other projects, like writing and the Apotheca shop and that sort of thing, but they would still be part of the community. And then that guy, and the South American, the head of the South American division, I guess you could call it, he was going to step up into one of those other positions. So it would have been the South American guy, the other Canadian guy, and me would have been the top three co-presidents, and we would have been actively leading the group, while Michael and Hope Marie would have still been there and still given lectures and things like that, but they weren't going to be getting too involved with the leadership portion of that sort of thing, in terms of like the organizational structure and that kind of stuff. But the guy in Canada unexpectedly passed away. He was young, and it was really tragic. And there wasn't a very good explanation for it either. I'm not going to get into the details of what we know or not, but it was inconclusive, the actual cause of death.
Do you
So,
suspect foul play or something else?
uh, I don't think so. It was pretty tragic, and I retreated into myself for a while because we had developed a pretty close friendship, and he was my mentee, and he was becoming really coming into his own. It was pretty tragic, especially because he was so young. And so I kind of went into a bit of a retreat. I kind of retreated from everything. And in that time, because there wasn't really any active leadership from myself or from Michael or Hope Marie, because they didn't really have the time for it anymore. Anyways, it basically went inactive. It still technically exists, but we kind of made it open source.
I see. I see. So tell me a little bit about the Luciferian Research Society.
The Luciferian Research Society is a community hub, you could call it, that I opened up. I founded in, I think it was August 2009. So basically, what's that, 16 years ago or something like that? So I created that when the Ordo Luciferi, that old group that I had joined out of when I'd left the Gnostic Church, the Ordo Luciferi that had kind of fallen apart, that I saw a lot of the problems that had occurred, and I wanted to try something new. I tried to create a group that was non-hierarchical. So I even made rules. There were rules where if you were an admin, you couldn't even put admin in your username, and you couldn't use it as a lever of power against other members, So there
Yeah.
was no titles. There were no titles, and it wasn't an order, and there would be no degrees. It was intended to be like a community center, and it would provide resources that could be utilized by orders. Multiple different orders were free to utilize the Luciferian Research Society to coordinate their public and private dealings. So you could create a group and then only approve who you wanted within the Luciferian Research Society. So there's a website, that worked as essentially a private social media platform just for people like us, people who were Luciferian or Luciferian adjacent, or any left-hand path practitioner, or even just open to those ideas and not scared off by, like anybody who could handle it was okay to join. As if they were going to go in there and start telling everybody how, they're all going to go to hell or whatever, then that wasn't going to be cool. But if you were in there to learn, then you could come in. If you were in there to find people to collaborate on projects with, you could totally do that. And later on, I ended up adding a Discord server as well. So the Luciferian Research Society is a website, but there is also a public Discord server. And I think there are, I looked at it earlier today and I know exactly how many people are on there. There's 420 registered members, which I kind of thought was a little funny.
Nice.
One of those
Nice.
meme numbers.
So I'll put the website in the show notes so people can come over there. So they just need to sign up and request access. Is that how it works?
Yeah, there is a $1 per month, $1 US per month fee, and that's just to basically keep the expenses covered
Hmm.
for keeping the website up. The Discord server, however, is completely free. You don't need to be a member of the website to join the Discord server. So if you want to check it out first, you can totally join the Discord server and get to meet a bunch of people. There's people on there talking every day, and that's completely free and open to anybody who wants to check it out. And then you can get a feel for it and decide if you wanted to join the website or something else, or just continue to be a solo practitioner, or, learn what you can learn, meet people, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's been around for a while too. I can't remember when I added the Discord server, but it was a really good idea.
Me too. I added one, I guess it was February of
Oh,
this
okay.
year. Yeah. So it's
Cool.
really enjoy that. So what, as far as the community where you live, you're in Toronto, right? Or,
I'm actually just outside of Toronto,
okay.
but I was in Toronto for a long time, but I'm less than an hour of drive outside
Okay.
of Toronto.
Is there a big left-hand path community there?
There has been in the past when I was doing the Greater Church of Lucifer and Assembly of Light Bearers. I also ran not just the international stuff, but also I ran a local group in Toronto. And at its peak, I was getting about 30 people coming to most meetings. And it was pretty cool. And we often, a good chunk of them would hang out at a local pub afterwards and continue in a more informal setting. So that was really fun. But I haven't had a chance to get the a local group going again in Toronto because I basically let it go during that time after my friend had died, and um, I just kind of became really introverted for a good several months, and I mean most of a year
Yeah. Yeah.
before I kind of came back out of my shell and started doing stuff again. And by that time, the energy had kind of dissipated, and I didn't feel like starting it back up at that point.
That's understandable. I mean, those things cut deep when you have things like that. I've had losses in our coven, and I mean, it really affects you. It really.
And I had also lost two people in the local group as well that had both passed on. And I cared a lot about both of them. So,
Right. Right.
so that as well, compounded on top of the other loss. And I couldn't do it at the time anymore. But I am interested in getting something going again. And I'm hopeful that it could be even bigger this time, because there is less of a stigma, for one thing, about it, even in just that time, in that time frame between when the GCOL ALB was active and now. I feel like a lot of that stigma has dissipated, some of it. And I
Right.
think that we could find a larger group of people this time potentially.
Well, I have a lot of viewers and listeners in Canada, believe it or not.
Oh, cool.
Um, so, hey, if you're in Canada around Toronto, I'll put the links in the show notes where you can contact Jeremy. I think
I appreciate that.
that's a great thing. Absolutely.
I was approached by somebody recently in Oshawa, Ontario, which is close to where I live. And they wanted to get a local group going in Oshawa. And they decided that they just wanted to do a wide net. So they decided they wanted to call it Occult Oshawa and asked me if I would help them do it because I had experience and that sort of thing. So I helped them organize the first meeting. And that was just a few days ago. And we were hoping to get, for the first meeting in a smaller city, you know, we were hoping about 6 people would show up. We like, if 6 people show up, I'll definitely be happy. We ended up getting something like 26 people.
Oh,
Maybe,
wonderful.
maybe even 28. It was something I can't remember. I didn't do the final count, but when they told me, I knew it was over 20. But when they told me, like, I think they said 20, 28 or 26, and I was like, holy, that was incredible. So
That's
that was the very
exciting.
first meeting. I know.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that
we
is
had a really
exciting.
cool, we had a
Yeah.
really diverse group of people, but we were all getting along and talking about our various different paths. And I did a demonstration of how to do an I Ching reading. So I did it with coins and did a demonstration for everybody in the group. And then we basically went around and gave a quick little introduction. And then we ended the formal part of the group and everybody just started mingling. And that was the event. And
Nice.
everybody really
Yeah.
seemed to have a really good time. And we're going to do them more often as well. So even in a small city like Oshawa that you wouldn't necessarily expect, I've heard a lot of people say, oh, I wish I had people in my local area. And I said, I bet you do. They just don't have a venue to meet. And you'd be
That's
surprised if you got something going and you put the word out there and you did it a bunch of times, to allow people who didn't hear about it at first to find out about it later, and keep doing it consistently. And you're going to be surprised at how many people you get.
absolutely. If you build it, they will come. Absolutely.
Yep.
I find that many times in my metrics, I am really surprised at the countries that people are viewing and tuning into, and then my Patreons as
Hmm.
well. They're very diverse from all over the world. And it's like you don't realize that, or at least I don't. As a content creator, I don't realize the reach that's there. And then someone will send an email from somewhere, and it's like, I've been watching you for years, I love your videos, this. And it's like, wow, there's nothing better to encourage a content creator than that.
I completely agree. I've
Yeah.
had a similar experience where I'm surprised at how far the message has gotten, and
So
the information that I'm sharing can be found by people who are looking for it from all over the world.
you have a Patreon as well. It's Novus Ordo Luciferi. Am I getting that right?
Yep, that's right. Novus Ordo Luciferi. Luciferi.
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
put that in the notes as well so everyone will know. Is that the best way to contact you?
The LRS Discord server would be the great point of entry. But if you want to jump right into actually being part of a community that's dedicated towards Gnostic Luciferianism, including uh, teachings and practices for a specific form of occult practice that I've developed called Luciferian alchemy. That's taught within the Novus Ordo Luciferi, and you get access to everything if you just sign into the Patreon at the lowest dollar amount, which right now is the $5 USD per month level. That unlocks everything. 50 hours of recorded video lessons and growing that are taught live and recorded and then added to the back catalog. All of the written teachings, all of the written ritual practices for Luciferian alchemy. You get access to all of it right up front. It's not gate kept between degrees. Although if you want that more traditional order experience, I am setting it up where you can go through it in a logical progression by degree. And you can choose to work through the material in that logical progression. And if you do that, then you can get degree recognitions when you've completed certain workloads and courses and things like that, and done certain practices and that sort of thing. Like if you've done self-initiation right and that sort of thing. And you can get recognition at those different degree levels and have that more traditional order experience if that is something that you find value in. But it's not gate kept behind those degrees. You can always jump around if you want. And if a particular course becomes available or you noticed it in the archive, you can just watch it and learn it and take that course. And one of the cool things I'm super excited about for the Novus Ordo Luciferi is we are developing the website, novusordoluciferi.org. We're developing it into a full learning platform. So you can actually take the courses on the website and you unlock it by logging in with your Patreon. And then so it has the courses all laid out in modules, and video is embedded into the modules, and we can add quizzes, additional resources, and you can get like in your dashboard, it'll show you how much progress you've made on different courses and that sort of thing. So a full learning platform for that, and you get access to that whole thing for that $5 a month Patreon level.
Nice. What a value.
Yeah, well, I've seen a lot of people
wonderful
out there, they have really expensive courses and it's not always accessible to people. So I wanted an option out there that is accessible, that people who are really interested in taking some of these types of courses can actually get access to it for a very reasonable amount.
What advice would you have for someone that is just, they're looking, they're trying to understand what is out there, what path is out there? What advice would you have someone take nowadays?
That's a good question. I would definitely recommend not worrying about labels. Just learn. Try things out. Explore. Try things out. Learn as much as you can. Follow your passions. Like lean into something that you find fascinating or intriguing, or even if you find it a little scary, lean into those things that stimulate you in different ways. Lean into it and explore it, and don't worry about what your label is. Don't worry about whether you're a left-hand path or right-hand path, or if you're a Luciferian, or if you're a theistic Satanist, or if you are a Setian practitioner, or any of that. Don't worry about, or if you're a Thelemite, or don't worry about the labels. That's my advice. Don't worry about labels. Just explore what you like. try it out, keep what you like, and at some point, maybe a label will come to you that you will really resonate with, and that's okay. But don't worry about it. You don't have to, it's not something you got to worry about.
That is great advice. Absolutely. So we've talked about a lot of stuff tonight. What have we not talked about that you would like to mention or discuss?
Yeah, maybe just a little bit about the Novus Ordo Luciferi. The name comes from a combination of two of my former projects. One of them being the Ordo Luciferi, which I was the head of and rewrote the rituals for and such. The other one is Assembly of Light Bearers. And if you look at the English translation of Novus Ordo Luciferi, it is New Order of Light Bearers. So it harkens back to what we were talking about with Assembly of Light Bearers, right? Basically the same kind of idea, but in order, because it's not just about the lifestyle and philosophy of Luciferianism. It's also got an occult system that it teaches as well to members who are interested in that aspect of it. So it's not just an assembly of light bearers, it's an order, an esoteric order of light bearers. And it is almost like a lot of the ideas that I had come up with in the original Ordo Luciferi and some of the things that I'd tried to get implemented through that entrenched, stubborn, you know, group that was already there. With the new rituals that I had written for that, some of those ended up becoming the seed of the new system of Luciferian alchemy that I had been developing for, I mean, basically the whole time I was an occultist. I've been continuing to refine my own methods. So that's what that means. New order of light bearers. So the members themselves are the light bearers. And it is an esoteric order. So in addition to the types of things that we were doing with the Assembly of Light Bearers, with the public talks, prepared talks on just different esoteric subjects, that's still part of this. But there is also exclusive teachings for members that are decide to dedicate some of their energy to learning this system and putting it into practice in their life. That's what I wanted to add because I thought that kind of puts it all, ties it all up, connects the old things to the new.
Wonderful. So thank you, Jeremy, for spending time with us tonight. I've been looking forward to this for a long time, and I know my audience is going to really enjoy it. So thank you again. And for those at home watching and listening, this has been Aleister Nacht, Ave Satanas.